Now welcome to another Let's Talk Some Star Wars, where this time we'll be taking a look at and discussing the results of the poll that basically asked you if you plan on watching Andor Season 2 or not. I'll also then be reading and responding to a few of the comments left on the poll. And so, let's get right to the results, where we'll see that 66% of people said I will absolutely be watching it or will at some point. 16% said I'll probably be watching it or probably will at some point. We then had 7% say I probably won't be watching it or won't watch it at any point, and then 11% said I will not be watching it and have no plans to ever watch it. And so if we figure here that indeed most of the people in the top two categories there are going to watch it and most in the bottom are not, we have maybe about 80%, 4/5 of people who plan on watching Andor Season 2. And I think the most interesting comparison we can right away do is to compare it to Skeleton Crew, where we had plenty of numbers for that. I did a poll each and every week, as most of you know. And though at the beginning about 64% of people were not watching, by the end of the series that was down to 55% not watching, which, no, that's still not really good or anything. As I always say, if you are getting my polls in your feed, you've probably watched my videos, you're probably a Star Wars fan. So over half of Star Wars fans not watching a new Star Wars show is pretty bad. That's actually really bad. Anyway, even though Skeleton Crew did not seem to interest a lot of fans, or the buzz around it wasn't enough, or they're just done with Disney, there's a lot of reasons we've discussed them why people perhaps didn't watch Skeleton Crew, but that doesn't seem to be necessarily applying here to the same degree by any stretch. This is potentially a pretty significant increase in viewership over Skeleton Crew among people who participated in this particular poll anyway, which are roughly the same people who participated in the Skeleton Crew polls. And so one could probably take away from this that, well, Andor is something special to a lot of people, that they really enjoyed Season 1, and even if they're not fans of everything else Disney is doing with Star Wars, that they are a fan of Andor, that it was that good. It could also be a sign that people don't necessarily want Star Wars to go in the direction of Skeleton Crew, even though I think it was a good show and I would recommend it. They would rather it go more, say, mature, because, yeah, Skeleton Crew was not exactly a kids show, but it was certainly skewed more that way, or being a more family-friendly show, where Andor really isn't a show you sit your kids down in front of the TV and watch together. Not saying you can't, but it really isn't as kid-friendly as Skeleton Crew was. Basically here, just looking at these results, if I worked at Lucasfilm or Disney and had to try to extrapolate something from this, and again, this is only from my viewers, if you will, another channel who didn't like Andor, who found it boring or whatever, would obviously get some very different results. They'd have different people watching their videos. But if I had to make any kind of educated guess about what this means, it's that, yeah, people want more like Andor. They want more serious writing. They want more adult-oriented Star Wars content. And they want it to be taken a bit more seriously than it has been before, which I don't think means we all would never watch another Skeleton Crew-like show. I think there is room for both in Star Wars. But if I had to decide what direction to take for the immediate future, at the very least right now, as you know, Star Wars is struggling with people, I would go more in the direction of Andor than I would in Skeleton Crew, even though, yes, I do like Skeleton Crew. Alright, let's now move on to some comments, but not before once again just saying thank you to everybody who votes, comments, or watches these, or any of my videos across both the channels, and a huge, huge thank you to those who support the channel on Patreon. Thank you so much for that. And now we will begin, as we always do with these polls, with the top-rated comment from it. And this time it comes to us from Stuart Robinson, who said, "It's a sad indictment of our fandom when a show written with intelligence and depth is called boring." Okay, so probably no surprise here, but I'm going to be a bit diplomatic with my response here and say that I get it if you don't like Andor. I get it if you find it boring. I get it if you don't think it's Star Wars, or if it's just not what you go to Star Wars for. Perhaps you prefer your Star Wars to be a little bit more adventurous and lighthearted and fun and all that sort of thing. I think that's fine. Enjoyment is subjective, and if you don't like it, you don't like it. However, I will take exception with the people who say it's a bad show. I couldn't disagree with you more. I think this is one of the best shows I have ever seen. It's a top 10, maybe a top 5 show of all time for me. I think it is that well written. I think the performances are that great. I think the sound, the score is on point. I think the special effects and the visuals are great. Everything with this show works for me, and if it doesn't work for you, that's fine, but I don't think you can make an argument that it is poorly made. Again, I think it is one of the best shows I've ever seen, and even if it wasn't Star Wars, I would say that, though at the same time, and this might sound contradictory, the fact that it is Star Wars also makes it better in some ways for me. It would be great if it wasn't Star Wars, but it being Star Wars, I think I appreciate it more, is the best way to put it, because I do disagree with it not being Star Wars or not feeling like Star Wars or not fitting in. I think it fits in better than most things that we get, especially out of Disney these days. It very much tackles the issue of good versus evil. It enhances everything else original trilogy for me because you begin to understand the oppression of the Empire and the sacrifices of the good guys and how far they sometimes have to go, how difficult it is to be the good guys, and how you can lose yourself along the way, how you can become or maybe have to become or flirt with the idea or the possibility of becoming something worse to defeat the greatest of evils. For me, this is all so on point to Star Wars that I just love it even more. Again, it's a great show on its own, but the fact that this is Star Wars and for me enhances everything else makes it that much better. Alright, and kind of going along with all that, we're going to quickly move on to this comment from Cyber Murph, who said, I can't wait to hear more about Mon Mothma's bank statements. Woohoo! Now that's some Star Wars. Okay, so even though I was just trying to be very diplomatic, and in general, I don't pick out comments that I want to tear apart, but this is going to be a rare exception because I do every now and then see something like this, which is just a very disingenuous comment. I'm sorry if you're watching the video, but it is. You're trying to make it sound like Mon Mothma's bank statements are somehow a big part of the plot when she's actually siphoning money to the rebellion and is on the verge of being discovered by the Empire for it, and the danger that will put her in. And you might say, well, we know Mon Mothma is going to be fine. We see her in Return of the Jedi. But the thing is, we've now learned she has a family. She has a husband and a daughter. And interestingly enough, we don't hear about them or see them in Return of the Jedi, which makes us wonder what happened to them. It goes along with what I was saying before, why this is interesting with Mon Mothma or Cassian or any of the other characters whose fate we know. Why it's interesting is because we begin to understand the prices that need to be paid to win in the end over the Empire. We're sitting here wondering what happens to Perrin, her husband, and to her daughter. Are they going to be killed? Are they going to be taken captive by the Empire? Are they going to turn on her? Could they turn her in? And that is the reason, or part of the reason, why she has to flee. That is why I'm on the edge of my seat with Mon Mothma's bank statements. Not because I know she's going to be fine in Return of the Jedi, but because I am curious to know what this character has to give up, and she is portrayed extremely well by Genevieve O'Reilly here. She gives an amazing performance. She has brought life to a character who just stood, again, in Return of the Jedi and gave the battle plans, and that was it. And so I'm on the edge of my seat waiting to see what becomes of her family and her and some of these other characters as well. But if all you see is bank statements, I'm sorry, I guess. Okay, and now we move on to this comment from Joseph Hutton, who said, Andor Season 1 blew me away. The writing is consistently stellar, and the performances are on point. Just when I thought it couldn't get any better, the next episode exceeds my expectations. Season 2 has a lot to live up to, but I have faith that they'll conclude one of the greatest TV shows of all time. And yeah, I absolutely agree. I have nothing but confidence going into Season 2, and I have seen a lot of comments, both in this poll and elsewhere since pretty much Season 1 wrapped up, that say they're worried that Disney or Kathleen Kennedy, they're going to want to meddle in the show now, and they're going to want to take it over and make it their own and do this or that to it. But I really don't see that happening. I really don't see them tampering with this. For one, I think Tony Gilroy has a lot of control here. I think he was allowed to pretty much do whatever he wanted in Season 1. He's pretty much said as much. And so I don't think he would come back and do a second season, even though he was contractually obligated to do so. That is why there is a second season in the first place. There was already a deal in place to actually do 5 seasons. It got condensed down to 2. But either way, I think Tony Gilroy is not going to play around with him. I think he has the power to do what he wants here, and they're not going to try to meddle with him, which isn't to say Season 1 is automatically going to be good because they're not meddling. Certainly it can be fumbled many other ways. Again, it being condensed from 5 seasons to 2 could be an issue. There could be a lot of things that go wrong, but I am going to go into this with nothing but confidence. I'm not trying to overhype myself or set myself up for disappointment, but I want to be positive about Season 2. I want to be excited, and thus I am going to be. Moving on now, we have a comment here from Roko Cardinal, who said, I gave up on Star Wars after Kenobi. I initially forgot Andor existed due to the disappointment around Kenobi, but after I started watching it, I was blown away. Andor Season 2 will be the last Star Wars media I watch in a long time. And this is another comment I saw quite a bit in the comments on the poll and have seen elsewhere for quite a while, that people are going to watch Andor Season 2 and pretty much nothing else Star Wars ever again, potentially. Which I think leads to a question for all of you in this category, as someone who, again, as I always say, I root for Star Wars, I want to see it get better. And so I'm curious, what would bring people back to Star Wars? What is it they need to do? And I might do like a poll question or just a question so people can respond to that, and we'll put it all there. But I'm kind of curious, like, you're obviously willing to watch a Star Wars show, and I'm not trying to be like an ass here to you or anything, I'm just actually genuinely curious. But you're willing to watch Andor Season 2, and maybe you're going to pirate it, I don't know, maybe you're going to sail the high seas and watch it. But let's assume you're going to resubscribe to Disney Plus, and you're going to give them your money, and you're willing to watch this Star Wars show. Like, what does it take to get you back? Again, I'm just kind of curious what you're looking for next, or what would lure you back. Because it seemed like some people did indeed give Skeleton Crew a chance after initially not watching it. Again, we had like a 10% increase over the 8-week runtime or 7-week runtime. So it seems like that was enough to bring some back who initially weren't going to watch it. But in this show, again, looking at the numbers, we have like 35% more people above that who are willing to come back and give it a chance, or willing to watch Andor and give Disney their money potentially. So the question then becomes, what exactly are you looking for? And again, I'm not trying to be mean or like, well, what do you want out of Star Wars already? I'm curious. What do you think would bring you back kind of full time, or just pique your interest again? Is it more like Andor? Is that what you want out of Star Wars? A little more gritty, a little more real? Or is it just in general you want more quality Star Wars? Which I know sounds like a dumb question. Of course, we all want quality Star Wars. But I'm kind of curious, what kind of show, what kind of movie, what would really pique your interest yet again? Okay, and final comment we're going to get to comes to us from Ronin the Ronin, who said, Andor Season 1 was such cinema. It lived up to Star Wars' identity without leaning on cheap references. The universe and minor characters were utilized in such an amazing way, and it was a space opera through and through. Characters had tension between them, their own motivations and palpable goals. And the speeches, God, the speeches. One way out, and what did I sacrifice? Everything, to name but two of the most well-known. And it's kind of crazy how, or maybe again a sort of indictment of Disney Star Wars, how one show, how Andor has, in my opinion anyway, most of the best moments in the Disney Star Wars era are in this show. It makes me kind of sad or angry, even though I love Andor. Don't get me wrong, I don't blame Andor for this. And yeah, again, Skeleton Crew, really good. I know I keep bringing it up, but it is in the hopes that more people give it a chance. But anyway, it kind of makes me sad. It kind of makes me angry in this way that Andor was just so much better than everything else. I mean, how does that happen? How do you have a franchise like Star Wars and just fumble it so frequently? Because Andor is proof they can get things right. They can take the time and the money and everything else that is needed to make a truly quality show. One that does stand both on its own and as a Star Wars show, as I talked about before. But the same company gives us things like Ahsoka or Obi-Wan, which, no, maybe they're not the worst things ever, but are they really that good? As I always say, or ask people who like and defend them, and again, you're free to enjoy them. Enjoyment is subjective. Just because I don't like something doesn't mean I have to be upset that somebody does. But I always ask them, would you really like Ahsoka if you took the Star Wars out? Would you really like Kenobi if you took the Star Wars out, all the references and all that? If Kenobi was a random dude with a different name in a different galaxy altogether, would that be a good show? Would you have found enjoyment in that? Would you have watched all 6 episodes? And maybe you would, but I have a feeling a lot of people wouldn't have. A lot of people would have just found that a bad show. And that's what I love about Andor and Skeleton Crew. They are good shows on their own, and they are also great Star Wars shows. And kind of answering my last question, I think. But if Star Wars is going to have a bright future, I think we really need more shows that are just well written for a change, instead of relying on being Star Wars to sell them. Okay, well, that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn. Take to the comments below. Tell me what you think about anything or everything I had to say here, or try to answer my question. If you're someone just, I'm not watching Star Wars anymore, or Andor is my last thing, what do you think it would take to bring you back, assuming you would come back? What kind of shows or movies are you looking for? Whatever the case may be, though, leave those comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars, and until next time, thanks for watching.